Hey, this is Kevin Mayo, and today we're going to drink Miller Lite. We are going to party like it's 1975. Drank a ton of this stuff back in the day. It was our go-to beer for me and my buddies, and we loved it. So they've been doing a lot of, advertising around. This is the original can. I said, I've never reviewed it, so why don't we go buy one and give it a shot, give it a taste, see if it's like what we remember. And so let's get cracking on it. Literally. As always, if you like the reviews, please subscribe. And go ahead and leave some comments, because I love talking about beer. Yeah, so this, did do a little research on it. And I guess the original recipe was from somebody associated with Rheingold, which is another old macro lager from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. As far as I know, they're out of business now. And they ended up selling it to Meisterbrau, which was in Milwaukee, was a direct competitor with Miller. And then Miller bought Meisterbrau's labels, and then they relaunched it as Miller Lite, and they really launched it nationally in '75. It was the year I graduated high school, so it was a really popular beer. I can't tell you why, other than the fact, it was Budweiser, it was Schlitz, it was Miller. And Bud was number one, Schlitz was number two. This is the beer that made Miller number two, put them over the top. So, enough of the history lesson. It is supposedly a fine Pilsner beer brewed with a special process. Not that there's any secrets in brewing beer. We all know how it's done. It's a very typical pale yellow, straw color, massively carbonated. Bubbles are just streaming through it. And we got about a finger of just a bright white head. Exactly what you'd expect from a macro lager. Aroma-wise, you get a little bit of saltine bready malt. You definitely get a little corn. And you get a hint, and just a hint, of a little bit of spiciness from the hops, which would be actually a traditional Pilsner taste. I mean, we're not talking heavy pepper, just a little bit of a tartness. So, here we go. Let's dive in and drink this puppy. Yeah. It's actually better than what I'd expect. I think it's got a little bit more oomph than Coors Light and a little bit more oomph than Bud Light. Not a lot, but a little bit. You get a little bit of bready up front. I mean, just a hint. You get some sweetness in the middle. You get a little bit of that corn taste in the middle. And then it finishes with a hint of sweetness, a hint of pepper. Hint of pepper, yeah. And a hint of bitterness. It's actually a little bit more bitter than I would expect on this. All things considered, this is a fairly well-made lager, Pilsner, whatever you want to call it. I always use those terms interchangeably. But a fairly well-made Pilsner, reasonably drinkable. I can see why they sell a ton of it. Again, this, for 50 years is what we called beer in this country. Maybe 70 years, 80 years, it was what we called beer in this country. In the middle 70s, local breweries were closing left and right. Labels would be being bought, like I just mentioned, Miller bought Meisterbrau. Rheingold was probably bought by somebody. My Home Beer was Narragansett. They were bought by Falstaff. All these breweries disappeared. And by the late 70s, early 80s, we're down to, I believe the number's like 60, 64 breweries, of which they made like 80 different beers. And then lo and behold, craft beer, microbrewery started to take off in the early 80s with some real pioneers, with Jim Cook Sam Adams, the guys over at Sierra Nevada, and I can never remember who there was somebody that's officially the first craft brewery. But this was the beer we drank. This was better than I expected it. Score-wise, you know, am I gonna stop drinking my IPAs and start drinking this? No. But I would give this a solid 65 out of 100. I think this is a pretty good beer. Till next time, keep drinking.